Listen carefully, Marlene. From now on, your money, your house, everything is under my control. Jada spat each word at my face like a slap. She even flicked the food tray upward on purpose, sending it crashing onto the cold garage floor, the very place I'd been forced to live like an outsider inside my own home. She leaned in close to my ear, her voice low and venomous like a snake whispering. You should stay quiet and be grateful I even let you stay. I stood frozen. The pain wasn't from the food scattered on the ground, but from being humiliated by my own daughter-in-law, crushed right on my dignity. But just as Jada smiled in satisfaction, the door burst open. My daughter, Ariel Hayes, stepped in, her eyes sharp like a blade. Jada, did you really just say that to my mother? And when Ariel took off the item she wore on her wrist and placed it on the table, Jada's face turned pale instantly. She knew everything she'd done had been exposed. What kind of evidence do you think Ariel brought that made Jada shut up on the spot? Comment your guess below. Subscribe to see the ending where the villain finally pays the price. I am Marlene Hayes, 69 years old, a mother, a former nurse, who once worked countless night shifts in the city hospital, who stood between ambulance sirens and fading heartbeats to drag patients back from the edge. Yet at this moment, I was trembling on a thin mattress laid on the cold garage floor, barely 7 degrees. My breath rose in faint white clouds. My fingers stiffened as if they no longer belonged to me. I stared up at the ceiling covered in cobwebs, trying to steady myself. It was absurd. I once saved people in the chaos of the emergency room, handled cases that anyone else would have abandoned. Yet tonight, I feared I might die in my own home. A fear not born from illness or accident, but from someone living just behind that wooden door, someone who should have considered me family. I pulled the old blanket closer. The musty smell clung to my skin. Footsteps echoed from the kitchen, tightening my chest. The garage door was shoved open, a harsh beam of light sweeping across me, like stripping away what little dignity I had left. Jada Morrell stood in the doorway. She didn't need to scream. Her eyes alone were enough to make me lower my head. She threw the food container onto the floor as if discarding something worthless. The lid popped open, food splattering across the concrete. The smell of cold leftovers made it even harder to breathe. "You're not a mother-in-law, Jada," said her voice sharp and high. She tilted her head, examining me like a broken object. "You're a wallet that breathes, so shut your mouth." Every word struck me like a slap. I raised my son to be kind. I welcomed Jada into this house with genuine warmth, yet here I was, a shadow shoved into the corner of my own home. I picked up the food container, my palms burning from the freezing concrete. Jada let out a small, sour laugh, the kind that pierced straight through my skin. She stepped closer, lowering her face toward mine. "You're lucky you're still breathing, Marlene." I swallowed hard, feeling my throat burn. But before she could say something even more poisonous, a sudden noise erupted from the front door. It flew open. My daughter, Ariel Hayes, walked in. The living room light fell across her face, a face full of resolve, sharper than any time I'd seen her defend her team at work. But this time, her gaze wasn't for me. It was locked on Jada. Ariel's eyes scanned the garage, then returned to me, curled up on the thin mattress. When she saw the bruises on my arms, her expression darkened. I knew in that instant that everything I tried to hide was now exposed. All the stories I kept from her, all the pain I concealed, all the nights I told her I was fine. Ariel stepped forward, her voice low, each word slicing like metal. Jada, what the hell did you just say to my mother? The air thickened. I saw Jada step back slightly, then quickly rebuild her arrogant posture, forming the smirk I knew too well. The smirk of someone who believed she still held control. She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing as if challenging Ariel. You came just in time to hear the best part. And right after that, Jada slipped her hand into her pocket, pulling out something I had never seen her dare to use in front of me during all these weeks. What was waiting for us behind that smile? I still remember clearly the day Jada stepped into my house for the first time, wearing a sweetness so smooth it felt like sugar melting on the tongue. The moment the door opened, she hugged me, her smile bright enough that I had no reason to doubt anything. "Mom, we're just staying for a few weeks," Jada said, her voice light, as if it could dissolve in the air. I looked at her, then at Robert standing behind her, hand in hand, eyes filled with the kind of worry that made their situation seem real. I believed it. I opened my door. And like a foolishly kind woman, I opened my trust as well. The first days passed peacefully, as if we were a proper family. Jada helped me tidy the kitchen, laughed, and talked like someone who had never known bitterness. She told stories about her old job, about the future, about things that sounded so real, so ordinary. Robert was quiet, reserved, but in his eyes I saw something that looked like relief at having a place to lean on. All of it convinced me I was doing the right thing, that taking them in was simply what mothers do. Then one afternoon in May, Jada walked into the living room holding a stack of documents neatly clipped inside a plastic folder. She smiled and placed it in front of me as if it were the simplest matter in the world. "Mom, you're getting older. Sign this so we can take care of you." "It's just a convenience paper," Jada said, the softness in her voice almost like a lullaby. I looked at the papers, at the long lines of tiny words, at the legal clauses too dense for my tired eyes to follow. Robert stood beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Just sign it, Mom. It'll make things easier for us," he said, kindness shining in his expression, and my heart yielded. I signed. I put my pen down without knowing I had just signed away my fate. That document, now that I look back, was nothing short of a sentence wrapped in gentle deception. But at that moment, I only thought of helping my children, thought I was doing what any mother would do. Only a week later, my world began to shift. Everything changed so quickly, I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment the nightmare started. The front door lock was changed. I discovered it when I came back from the store, standing in front of my own home like an unwelcome guest. Jada opened the door holding the new key and speaking in a tone completely different from before, firm and empty. "From now on, you need my permission for everything. Do you understand?" I froze. Those words weren't just spoken, they cut into me like a blade. In that instant, I realized that the sweetness from the beginning was merely the mask of someone entirely different. Robert stood behind Jada, head down, silent, to the point that I no longer recognized the son I raised. I tried to steady myself, tried to ask about the bank account, about my pension card I had worked decades to earn. Jada simply crossed her arms and stared at me with a hollow authority. "Your money is under our care. You told us to handle everything, remember?" I staggered into the kitchen, opening cabinets, drawers, searching through every corner I had organized for 20 years. Bills were gone, important documents vanished, my bank card nowhere to be found. Everything disappeared as if it had never existed. Jada's voice rose behind me, steady and sharp like metal. "This house has new rules. If you want to use anything, eat anything, or enter any room, you ask me first." I turned back and looked at her. Her eyes were stripped of every trace of warmth. The woman who once embraced me the day she entered the house felt like a complete illusion I had invented. My throat tightened, my chest clenched so hard I had to grip the table to stay upright. How could everything change this fast? How could just 1 week turn my home into a place where my freedom no longer belonged to me? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room staring into the space that used to be my pride. I looked at the family photos on the wall, memories so gentle they only deepened my pain. I remembered every signature I placed on the page, every sweet smile Jada showed me, every nod of trust I foolishly gave. And the next morning, when I turned on my phone to check my pension account, the screen showed 0. No warning, no explanation. My entire monthly pension disappeared in 48 hours. And at that exact moment, I heard Jada calling me from the end of the hallway, her voice sharp, as if announcing another storm was about to strike. I hadn't even stood up yet when her shadow appeared in the doorway. The following days passed as if an invisible hand was tightening slowly around my throat. From the moment Jada changed the locks and seized full control, the atmosphere inside the house changed as well, thick and heavy, making even a simple breath feel painful. I lived in a home that had once been as familiar as my own heartbeat, yet each step now felt like walking through the territory of a predator. One early morning, as I stepped out of my room, Jada was standing at the staircase, her gaze sharp, as if inspecting every inch of me. She moved closer, her breath brushing against my ear, just enough for me to hear each word she dripped out. "Your glory days died a long time ago," whispered. The softness of her voice unable to hide the sting that struck straight into my chest. I froze, partly from fear, partly from realizing how deeply her contempt had taken root. After that, Jada began cornering me day after day. She seized my phone on a quiet afternoon, as if taking something she owned. When I tried to take it back, she merely glanced at me, her thin smile cutting like a blade. "You don't need a phone. You don't talk to anyone." I stood there, my heart tightening. In an instant, everyone I could have called in an emergency was taken away from me. Jada went on to change the Wi-Fi password, lock my office door, and tuck the key into her pocket like a trophy. The spacious house suddenly shrank into a few square feet where I was allowed to walk. Whenever I stepped down the hallway, I heard Jada's footsteps trailing behind, a toxic shadow waiting for the smallest mistake to turn into a weapon. Derek, my son, saw everything, yet he kept his distance, his eyes always avoiding mine. When I called his name, my voice shook, but I clung to a fragile sliver of hope. "Derek, can you talk to me for a moment?" He only blinked, responding in a voice so small it barely existed. "Another time, Mom." I looked at his face, the child I once held close, now standing before me like a stranger. I knew he was afraid, and that fear had a name, Jada. I was no longer allowed to cook, touch the washing machine, or open the windows for a bit of light. Every little thing I had done for years was now forbidden by Jada. Each time I resisted, she tilted her head, her eyes dimming as if she were examining someone losing their mind. "You're forgetful," she said, her voice steady and cold. "I'll soon prove you're incompetent, then sign you into a nursing home." Those words slid into my ear like ice water running down my spine. I felt her actions were not an outburst of anger, but part of a carefully crafted plan. Jada didn't behave like someone frustrated in the moment. She acted like someone who had mapped out a path to erase me from her life. I started doubting my own memory. Sometimes I couldn't recall where I had left a spoon or whether I had locked my door. Small things, yet vital things, I remembered doing but no longer felt certain of. I wondered whether my mind was truly slipping or whether Jada wanted me to believe so. One evening, I tried grounding myself by sitting alone in the living room, watching the streetlight glow through the thin curtain. But the quiet did not last long. I heard Jada's voice somewhere behind the house, low and tense, as if speaking to someone on the phone. I listened, every hair on my neck rising when her words became clear. She's about to break. Perfect timing. I sat frozen, my heart pounding against my ribs. Jada's footsteps began moving toward me, each step sounding like a warning of something I wasn't ready to face. The days lived in fear left my body exhausted, unable to tell time apart. Each morning, I woke, trying to keep my spirit steady, yet every step Jada made inside the house tightened my chest. I stopped calling her name, afraid that even saying it aloud might give her another reason to push me deeper into the shadows. Every time a door opened, my shoulders flinched on instinct, unsure of what waited on the other side. One afternoon, I tried to gather enough strength to step out into the backyard, hoping for a single breath of open air. But Jada stood right at the garage door, her stare sharp enough to halt my steps. I barely had time to react before she grabbed my shoulder and shoved. My back struck the cold concrete wall, and a wave of pain shot up my spine. Jada no longer bothered to hide her aggression. She leaned forward, her voice high and harsh, slicing into me like metal. "Fall, old woman." I need an excuse. I tried to steady myself. My body felt bent under invisible pressure. Yet the deepest pain did not come from the impact, but from her eyes, the eyes of someone who wanted me erased. I collapsed onto the garage floor, breath stumbling, hands clawing at the edge of a cardboard box for balance. Jada stepped back, arms crossed, watching me like she was admiring a scene she created. I held my tears, but my throat tightened painfully. When she finally turned away, I remained on the floor, feeling each heavy heartbeat in my chest. I had no idea how to stand, my body aching with every breath, but I still dragged myself toward the mattress. Suddenly, I heard soft footsteps outside the garage door. A small figure appeared, hesitating at the threshold. The door cracked open, and a young face peeked inside, eyes round with fear. It was Malia, the 12-year-old girl from next door. Her hands shook slightly, clutching her phone, as if she was afraid it would slip away. She stepped toward me slowly, eyes darting around like she feared Jada could appear at any moment. I filmed it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm scared of her." I looked up, staring at the phone in her trembling hand, my heart skipping a beat. "What did you film, Malia?" She unlocked the screen and held it close so I could see clearly. In the shaky frame, I saw myself being shoved, saw Jada lunging toward me, saw the cruelty in her expression, raw and entirely unmasked. My hand flew to my mouth, tears spilling uncontrollably. After so many days, being blinded, being told my memory was failing, being gaslit until I doubted every thought, everything snapped open inside me. I reached gently for Malia's shoulder, my fingers trembling. "You're my little angel." She stepped back, slightly afraid I might hug her. Her young face was shadowed with worry. I knew how brave she had to be to bring me that video. She didn't understand adult conflicts, but she understood fear, and that fear made her avoid Jada's gaze every time she saw her outside. I watched the video again, my hands unsteady, as hope flickered alive. This was the first piece of evidence, something Jada couldn't twist into hallucinations or confusion. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling the weight of truth settling into my hands. Part of me wanted to rush out and show someone immediately, but the other part knew haste could cost me this only chance. I had to wait for Ariel. I had to keep this video safe. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself so the child wouldn't see me break. "Thank you, Malia," I said, voice thick. "You're very brave." She lowered her head, her eyes filled with something sad, as though she understood this was far bigger than what a child should deal with. She tightened her backpack strap, looking like she wanted to say more but feared Jada might hear. The garage fell silent for a few seconds. Only my breathing and Malia's filled the tense air. She glanced around once more, then stepped closer, her lips trembling. I saw her bite down lightly before speaking, and what she said nearly made my legs give out. Malia whispered, her voice fragile and breaking apart. "Miss, she knows I saw." At that exact moment, the back door slammed open and familiar heavy footsteps echoed toward us, loud and forceful, like the storm named Jada was marching straight in our direction. The days after receiving the video from Malia felt like standing on the final edge of my life. Every breath was a battle. I hid the girl's phone in an old pair of shoes beneath my thin mattress, but fear clung to me every minute. If Jada ever found it, every hope would turn to dust. I sat curled up in the garage, watching a thin strip of light slip through the door gap as if it belonged to a world far away. Cold seeped from the concrete floor into my spine, making my shoulders tremble. I had worked in emergency rooms, stood for hours under harsh fluorescent lights, but the cold inside this garage pierced me deeper than any winter night I'd ever endured. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to trap whatever warmth was left. The temperature dropped low enough to numb my fingers. When I laid down on that worn mattress, it felt like sliding into a darkness with no path out. I kept asking myself, if I fall asleep, will I wake up again? That question hung over me like a black cloud waiting to collapse. Jada kept tossing a cold can of soup into the garage each day. She never met my eyes. She placed it down as though throwing scraps for an animal, then shut the door before I touched it. I ate slowly to stretch out the tiny bit of strength it gave me, yet my body still deteriorated. I lost nearly 10 pounds in a few weeks. My vision blurred, and the walls shifted each time I tried to stand. Some days I didn't feel my heartbeat at all. My entire body felt drained. I clung to the edge of the mattress to keep from falling. My hands, once steady when holding patients' lives, now trembled uncontrollably. I stared at the bare garage ceiling, my mind sinking deeper with each breath. What had I lived all these years for if to end like this? Why was I begging for a sliver of existence inside my own house? I had been strong once, had pulled people back from death countless times. Yet now I was collapsing on a torn mattress like a fading shadow. One evening, Derek came in to get something. I saw his figure hesitate. I forced my dry voice to rise, calling his name softly. "Derek." He turned, avoiding my eyes like a child caught stealing. I wanted to plead, to ask why, to know if he still saw me as his mother. But what slipped out was a broken whisper. "Is this the death I deserve, Derek?" His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists, but then he turned away. No words, no reassurance, no sign that he still had the courage to stand beside me. His footsteps echoed slowly, fading into a silence that crushed the last fragile corner of my heart. When the door shut, I collapsed onto the mattress. My tears fell silently, soaking into the old fabric. I had lived more than half a lifetime, survived the loss of my husband, endured sleepless nights in crowded hospitals, raised 2 children with everything I had. Yet never had I felt so small. I feared sleeping, afraid I might wake up no longer myself, afraid Jada would find the video, afraid Derek would sever the last thread between us, afraid Ariel wouldn't come in time. I feared silence, darkness, even the weak rhythm of my own breath. I grabbed Malia's phone and played the video again. I watched Jada shove me, watched my body slam into the wall. But what broke me wasn't the violence, it was the glance of the girl filming, her terrified but determined little eyes. She had been braver than the adults living under the same roof. I pressed the phone against my chest as if holding on to the last bit of hope. Even faint, it kept me from falling deeper. That night, the garage felt like a crypt. Cold air slipped through every crack and scraped against my skin. I curled into myself, yet warmth never came. My breathing thinned to a thread. Everything around me sank into a deep, hollow quiet. I closed my eyes, searching for a sliver of peace, but peace never belonged in this place. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps outside the door. The steps were familiar enough to make me jolt upright. My hands trembled violently. The key turned once, and the door swung open. Jada stood there, half her face swallowed by the dark. She stared at me without blinking, as though she had already decided something. I struggled to sit up, gripping the mattress edge to keep from collapsing. She stepped inside, closed the door, and leaned forward. Her voice was ice. "Tomorrow, I end this." I didn't have time to react before Jada lifted her foot and kicked the shoe where I hid the phone. She kicked hard enough that I heard the sharp click echo through the dark garage. I had no idea how long it had been since Jada kicked the shoe where Malia's phone was hidden. I held my breath, every inch of my body tight, like a cord ready to snap. She bent down and rummaged through the pile of things beside the mattress, making my heart pound violently inside my chest. I thought I had lost everything, thought tomorrow would truly be the end, just as she promised. But right as Jada reached for the shoe, a familiar par stopped in front of the house. Quick footsteps. The front door swung open. A voice tore through the stale air of the garage like lightning. "Mom, where are you, Ariel?" Her voice made my head spin with a mix of fear and relief. I dragged myself closer to the door, but the garage opened before I even touched it. Light spilled in from the hallway, making me squint. And then I saw Ariel standing there, hair disheveled, face pale with panic, still clutching her car keys with trembling fingers. "Mom, oh my God, what happened to you?" Her eyes moved from my bruised face to my hands, then to the thin mattress on the concrete floor. When the light revealed the bruises along my wrists, I saw her whole body freeze for a moment before anger rippled hard through her gaze. I wanted to reassure her, but my throat was dry, my voice gone. Ariel knelt beside me, wrapping her arms around me, trembling so badly that her fear shook into my bones. "Mom, can you breathe? Are you hurt? Who did this to you?" Before I could answer, another voice intruded, Jada's, cold and casual, as if commenting on a broken object. "Look at her. My house, my rules. And her money is mine too." Ariel rose, turning sharply. Her hand tightened so hard, the knuckles whitened. She didn't shout, didn't throw herself at Jada like Jada clearly wanted. She stood tall, spine straight as a bowstring, her face colder than I had ever seen in all 28 years of raising her. "Say that again," Jada Ariel said, her tone low, like a sharpened blade. "Say it clearer." Jada folded her arms, leaning against the doorframe as if she were the victor of some twisted contest. "I don't need to repeat myself," Jada replied with a slow, mocking tone. "Look at your mother. She's old. If she can't manage her money, someone younger handles it. I run this house. She knows her place." Ariel took one step forward, small but sharp enough to make Jada's eyes flick, sensing the shift in the air. "My mother is lying on the floor of a garage," Ariel said, each word landing like a hammer. "My mother is shaking from hunger. My mother is injured. And you stand there calling that managing?" Jada laughed. "So what? She signed the papers. Everything is mine." In that moment, Ariel slipped her hand into her coat pocket. I thought she would call the police, but instead she pulled out her phone and opened an app. A soft beep cut through the thick silence. Ariel was recording. The cold glint in her eyes made Jada smirk falter for half a second. "Go on, Jada," Ariel said, holding the phone up. "You're just getting started." Jada stared at the phone, then at me. She understood Ariel was not Derek, not weak, not scared of her, not someone she could bend with words. Her eyes narrowed, but the confidence crept back quickly. She stepped forward, brushing her shoulder against Ariel as if testing a boundary. "You want to record me?" Jada asked, dragging each word. "Fine. I'm not afraid of anything," Ariel answered with a thin smile, not of amusement, but of someone who knew her opponent had just walked straight into the trap. The air inside the garage thickened. Jada glanced at me with a threat glowing in her eyes. Then she faced Ariel again, lifting her chin like a person daring fate itself. "I'm taking this entire house." The words fell from her mouth like a confession soaked in arrogance, so reckless that I clenched my fists. Ariel stood without blinking, letting Jada bury herself deeper. Before Ariel could speak, Derek appeared at the doorway, his face tight with panic, and the first sentence he said left both of us in stunned silence. The air in the garage stretched tight when Derek appeared at the door, but only a few seconds later, I realized Ariel wasn't shaken at all. In fact, her eyes grew sharper, darker, as if she had stepped into a battlefield she had prepared for long before this moment. Jada still stood before her with arrogant confidence, yet I sensed something shifting, an undercurrent only Ariel controlled. Ariel tightened her grip on the phone that was still recording, holding it just high enough for Jada to notice clearly. "Go on," she said calmly, almost chilling. "What else did you take from my mother? What were you planning to do next?" Jada sighed as if everything was tedious, then loosened her shoulders. "I already said it," she replied, her tone dragging. "This useless old woman. I spent the whole year taking her assets." She shivered the moment she said the whole year. "Everything began long before I ever suspected," Jada went on as if eager to flaunt her cruelty. "I planned each step. Changing the locks, draining the money, making her doubt herself. Pathetically easy." Ariel said nothing, simply stared into Jada's eyes with a coldness sharper than steel. Derek stood behind them, mouth half open as if wanting to speak, but Ariel raised her hand to silence him. I understood then that this moment belonged solely to Ariel and Jada, two forces colliding with no room for retreat. Then Ariel inhaled slowly and pulled another phone from her coat. She opened a folder, scrolled briefly, then held the screen right in front of Jada's face. "Watch everything," she said. The first video played, showing Malia trembling as she recorded Jada shoving me into the wall. The audio echoed in the still garage, every breath, every impact, every cruel word from Jada ringing out unmistakably. I saw Jada's body jolt when she recognized the moment she thought she had buried forever. Ariel switched to the next image, this time of the garage, the thin mattress on concrete, the tattered blanket, the cold can of soup thrown to the floor. With each picture, Jada's face drained of color. She couldn't deny, couldn't twist, couldn't gaslight her way out. Next, Ariel opened the 6-month bank statements. Every withdrawal, every transfer into Jada's account, every cent accounted for. Nearly $40,000 gone from my pension. Each number cut deep, but not into me, into Jada's collapsing confidence. $39,852, Ariel read, her voice steady. That's what you stole, and you call my mother useless? Jada stepped back, her hands trembling, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Derek stared at her with horror, perhaps the first time he understood the person he brought into this house. Ariel wasn't finished. She played the audio recording. Jada's voice boomed in the garage like thunder. This house is mine. Her money is mine. I'm taking the entire house. Ariel stopped the recording and stepped closer until her face was inches from Jada's. Jada's complexion turned a ghostly green, her mouth opening but unable to form words. She was no longer the smug daughter-in-law towering over me. She was a criminal watching her own downfall in real time. Ariel leaned in, her voice dropping low enough to send chills across my arms. You think you're clever? You're standing on the rope of your own noose. Jada trembled. She looked for someone to help her, anyone. But Derek had stepped back, his hands dangling helplessly. In his eyes, regret flickered, but regret doesn't save anyone this late. Ariel continued her tone, even like delivering a final verdict. I suspected for a long time. I checked Mom's accounts, reviewed the bank logs, investigated the lock changes. Everything lined up when neighbors mentioned noises from the garage at night. And when Malia gave me the video, I knew it was over. Jada stuttered, What are you doing? Ariel let out a short, icy laugh that made the hair on the back of my neck rise. I'm letting you say everything yourself. Confess. Bind yourself. Tighten the noose around your own neck. The air held its breath. Jada's gaze flicked toward the hallway, then to me, then back to Ariel. Her face was pale, lips trembling. I had never seen Jada frightened, but now her entire body shook as if she finally understood she was out of exits. And then Jada spun around suddenly. She bolted toward the front door, nearly tripping from panic. She shoved Derek aside and scrambled up the stairs, her breathing uneven like prey being hunted. Ariel didn't chase her. She simply stood there, chest rising sharply, eyes following Jada's shadow, disappearing behind the corner. The moment Jada's footsteps stopped upstairs, I heard a door slam violently, and that sound made Ariel sprint up the stairs as if she sensed something terrible on the verge of happening. After the sound of the upstairs door and the way Ariel sprinted up like a gust of wind, everything happened so fast that all I remembered was being lifted out of the garage, placed into a car, and taken to the hospital. I couldn't recall the road, only the warmth from Ariel's hand gripping mine the entire ride. For the first time in weeks, I felt someone was pulling me away from the edge of a cliff. Under the harsh white hospital lights, my body felt exposed, stripped bare, with bruises, discoloration marks from every shove, push, and Jada crushed my spirit. The doctor examined me, glanced at Ariel, and his face darkened as if he had witnessed something unforgivable. You are suffering from stage 2 malnutrition, he said, his voice tense. These bruises were caused by strong force, not accidental. This is abuse. Each word hit me like a stake driven into the ground. Abuse. It was the first time someone had spoken the truth aloud. Ariel squeezed my hand firm enough to steady me, yet gentle enough not to hurt. In her eyes, I saw pain, but behind it was an unmovable determination. The doctor continued listing the damage. electrolyte imbalance, acute stress responses, sleep deprivation, muscular atrophy. He asked how long I'd gone without proper meals. I lowered my head. I couldn't remember anymore. My days in the garage blurred into one cold fog of hunger, fear, and isolation. When the doctor recommended calling Adult Protective Services, Ariel nodded immediately. "Call everyone you need. I'll handle the rest." 2 hours later, a woman walked in. Short hair, sharp eyes, gray blazer. She introduced herself as Monica Lewis, an elder abuse attorney sent by the hospital. When she reviewed my file and looked at my frail body curled on the bed, she exhaled sharply as though trying to contain her shock. "Marlene," she said slowly, "you weren't simply abused. You were systematically tortured." I closed my eyes. The words were heavy, but they were true. The nights Jada pushed me, the meals thrown at the floor, the freezing garage, the isolation from the world, none of it was accidental. All of it was deliberate. Monica sat beside me, placing her hand gently over mine. "I promise you, this ends now. No one will ever touch you again." Ariel stood next to her, eyes red with fury, but her hand on my shoulder stayed gentle, steady, protective. The next morning, Monica and investigators went straight to the county courthouse. Ariel submitted every piece of evidence: Malaya's video, the photos of the garage, 6 months of bank statements showing nearly $40,000 missing, and the audio recordings of Jada bragging about her intentions, all arranged methodically, airtight. The hearing with the judge took less than an hour. When Monica stepped out holding a stack of documents, she nodded at Ariel firmly. "It's done. The court issued emergency orders. The power of attorney I signed was nullified." All accounts Jada accessed were frozen immediately. A restraining order forced Jada to stay 300 meters away from me at all times. Adult Protective Services gained full authority to monitor my safety for 30 days. Ariel released a long breath, as though she had finally dragged me back from the edge. I had never seen my daughter so strong. She handled everything: documents, procedures, evidence, shielding me from the storm I had no strength left to face. When we left the hospital, Derek called Ariel repeatedly, but she refused to answer. Perhaps he already sensed what awaited him. I stared out the car window, watching the city blur into fragments. I was exhausted, but somewhere inside, a small flame finally flickered back to life. That night, as Ariel brought me to her home, I sat on the sofa while Derek's phone rang nonstop. He stood outside the old house, afraid to enter, calling from a distance. Ariel pressed silent and placed the phone face down. Then a call came in from Jada. The name glowed red on the screen like a warning. Derek stared at it, his fingers trembling, before he finally answered. Jada's voice burst through the speaker, no longer arrogant, but sharp and deranged like an animal cornered. "If you don't take my side," she hissed, breath ragged, "I'll drag you down with me." Derek's face drained of color. The phone slipped from his hand, and Ariel lunged forward to grab it just as Jada began to say something that made my blood run cold. The trial took place on a cold gray morning. I sat in the witness section, my hands clasped tightly to stop the trembling. Ariel sat beside me, her eyes sharp and steady, exactly like the day she first opened the garage door and saw me shaking on the floor. Derek sat a row behind us, his head bowed so low I could barely see his face. The air in the courtroom pressed on my chest like a slab of stone. Jada was brought in. Still the same hair, still the same eyes that once looked at me as if I were trash. But today she was different. Her face pale, her lips trembled, her steps unsteady. She tried to appear fragile, as if everything that happened was a misunderstanding, and she was the unfortunate one. When the judge asked Jada to speak, she immediately burst into tears, the sound of her sobbing clearly forced. "I only wanted to help my mother-in-law," she said, her voice wavering as she clutched her chest like her heart was breaking. "Everything I did was for her. I don't know how it turned into this." Ariel shot up from her seat. "Help?" she said, voice ringing so loud the judge had to call for order. Ariel didn't sit back. Her eyes were locked on Jada. "Locking my mother in a garage is helping?" The courtroom sank into several seconds of heavy silence. Jada lowered her head, trying to keep her act together. I didn't know about any of that. I was misunderstood." Attorney Monica placed a thick stack of documents on the table and said, "Your Honor, we have evidence proving the defendant lied in every statement." And the unveiling began. Malia's video played on the large screen. The sound of Jada yelling, the shove, the thud of my back hitting the wall echoed across the room. Derek covered his face, his shoulders shaking. Ariel squeezed my hand tightly, grounding me, letting me know everything would finally be made clear. Next came the photos of the garage, the thin mattress, the torn blanket, the cold can of soup tossed on the concrete. Several people in the audience gasped. They couldn't believe the crying woman before them had done something so cruel. Then the bank statements, every withdrawal, every transfer into Jada's account, nearly $40,000 gone. Jada's face drained of color, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She looked toward Derek for support, but he avoided her eyes. When Ariel played the audio recordings, Jada's own voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. "This useless old woman. I spent the whole year taking her assets. I'm taking the entire house." No one spoke. No one had to. Every lie Jada had told collapsed under the weight of her own words. Then it was Derek's turn. I watched my son stand trembling, covering half his face with one hand. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking apart. "I was wrong. I was blind." My heart clenched, not because his apology came late, but because I realized Jada had used his affection, his guilt, his soft heart to manipulate him day after day. Derek turned to the judge, tears falling. "I believed the wrong person. I let my mother go through that. I will never forgive myself." Ariel placed a hand on his shoulder when he returned to his seat, but her eyes never left Jada. Those were the eyes of someone who knew the villain was finally facing a truth they couldn't escape. Once all the evidence was laid out, the judge looked through the file, then at Jada for a long, chilling moment. After a heavy silence, the ruling came. The defendant, Jada Rowan, is sentenced to 18 months in prison and 5 years of probation. I closed my eyes. Part of me felt lighter. Another part still ached from everything I had endured just to hear those words. Jada lurched to her feet. Handcuffed, she thrashed like a wild animal. "No, I didn't do anything. She will pay for this, Marlene. Do you hear me?" Her voice cracked, filled with hatred and madness. I watched her, not with fear, but with a strange sense of release. She had torn my life apart, piece by piece, but now the truth had won. Ariel pulled my seat closer to the safety barrier. Monica stood beside us like a shield. Derek bowed his head, shoulders shaking uncontrollably, but for the first time, I saw resolve behind his tears. As Jada was dragged away, she screamed, cursed, and struggled until her strength ran out. But the courtroom doors slammed shut, cutting off her voice. The judge remained on the bench. He adjusted his glasses, glanced at Monica, and said, "There is one more matter." Ariel and I lifted our heads at the same time. My heart thudded sharply, sensing something unfinished. The judge continued slowly and clearly. "In addition, The defendant, Jada Rowan, will be investigated further for federal fraud. I was about to ask Ariel what that meant when attorney Monica's phone rang and she went pale the instant she saw the name of the caller. The trial ended, the metal door behind Jada closed, and everything in me collapsed like a sudden wind sweeping away a long nightmare. But when we stepped out of the courthouse, the afternoon sunlight hit my face, making me squint. For the first time in months, I felt warmth without pain tightening my chest. Ariel held my hand and brought me home. Not the garage, not that cold space reeking of cement, but my real home. The home I used to clean every morning, where I once hung family photos on every wall. When I stepped into the living room, my feet stopped. I looked around, afraid even a whisper could make the scene disappear. "It's your home, Mom," Ariel said softly. "It's yours again." I placed my hand on the armrest of the sofa. The soft fabric felt familiar, yet the memory of being forbidden to enter this room made my spine shiver. I exhaled deeply. My house is mine again. The words escaped me like a prayer, not with pride, but with revival, each syllable sinking into the air, reclaiming the space Jada once tried to strip from me. A corner of the room still had the court seal taped to it. I stepped past it like stepping out of darkness and into light. Ariel set her bag down and turned to face me, her eyes bright and sharp enough to make tears sting my own. "Mom," she said, "I followed Jada for 3 weeks before you were able to reach me." That sentence sliced through my chest, not because of fear, but because I realized I had never truly been alone. I knew something was wrong. I felt like you were in danger, but I couldn't reach you. I even came to the house twice, but Jada made excuses saying you didn't want to see me. I swear I will never let anyone touch you again. The tears came hard, not from pain, but from being protected. After months of being silenced and stripped of the right to ask for help, I finally heard my own child say the words I thought I'd never hear again. That afternoon, attorney Monica stopped by with the official sentencing documents. The word incarceration printed boldly, the section on probation long and heavy like a warning to anyone who thought they could trample the elderly. I held the paper, my hand trembling, but I felt a light rising in my chest that I had forgotten existed. To stand before justice and survive long enough to witness it, that was something I would never forget. That evening, Derek arrived. He stayed at the doorstep for a long time, his hand shaking like a child outside the principal's office. I opened the door without speaking. He dropped to his knees right there on the porch, his sobs breaking so violently that even Ariel had to wipe her eyes. "Mom," Derek choked out, "I filed for divorce." I was blind. I let Jada fool me. I let you suffer. I know you can't forgive me right away, but I want you to know this. I won't let anyone hurt you again. I looked at my grown son kneeling at my feet, his shoulders trembling with remorse. The pain he caused me didn't vanish, but I still placed my hand on his shoulder. Not forgiving, but giving him a path forward. "Derek, justice has done its part. Now it's your turn." That night, I sat in the living room as the warm lamplight glowed over our family photos. I touched the picture of myself holding my 2 children when they were young, their faces full of joy. Despite everything, I still had my home, and the most important thing, my children's love. Ariel set a cup of hot tea in front of me. "Mom," she said gently, "your daughter is always here." I smiled warm and full, the kind of smile I feared I had lost forever. No one humiliates me while my daughter stands there. I thought everything was finished, thought the darkness had left with Jada as the prison door closed behind her. But the next morning, when I went to check the mailbox, a thick envelope sat inside. No sender. Only 3 words that made my fingers freeze. From the prison. I tore open the edge. Each slanted letter hit my eyes like a cold splash of water, Marlene. I need to see you. My fingers froze on the letter, and Ariel ran out from inside the house when she heard the sound of me dropping the envelope onto the driveway. I have lived long enough to understand one thing. Evil may run ahead for a while, but justice always reaches the finish line before the night closes in. And if anyone ever asks what I fear the most, I will say this: I do not fear the dark. I fear only those who think they can lock away the light.